one, I think that's where we need to.
Welcome, everyone. This is Drew Bartlett, Executive Director, South Florida Water Management District, and welcome to the Water Resources Accountability and Collaboration Public Forum. Thank you, everyone, for joining us via Zoom today. We are coming to you from the auditorium where it is quite empty, but I'm glad everyone can still participate given our new technology. As everyone knows, the Water Management District under the leadership of Governor DeSantis have been completely focused on trying to address our water quality issues and our water resource issues over the past 3 years. But this summer, of course, we had some harmful algal blooms in Lake Okeechobee and around Lake Okeechobee that the district, partnering with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, needed to jump on to address public health concerns and other issues associated with those harmful algal blooms. So we learned a lot over the summer. We experimented and tried some technologies. And what I wanted to do today was to engage this forum with what we learned and what we experienced, and get your feedback as we move forward in preparation for the next algal bloom season. So we have two presentations today. The first will be from Dr. Anna Wachnicka, who will present data that we've collected in Lake Okeechobee and what we observed throughout this summer, followed by Rory Feeney, who really kind of head up our algae strike team and deploying these technologies and trying to figure out how to best address harmful algal blooms when they occur. We will get those presented to you, and then after that, in discussion 4, we will have discussion with the WRAC participants. And so if you're a WRAC participant, I'm going to ask you when we get to that agenda item to use the raise hand feature so that I can call on you. Please state your name for the record when you speak for the other folks participating. And ask your questions, engage, give me your feedback, and I'd really appreciate it. When we move to item 5, public comment, members of the public are welcome to comment, and I really appreciate it when you do. But you can also use your raise hand feature, and Yvette will call on you to provide your public comment. If you're having trouble with the Zoom technology, you can go to our website and click on the Ask Us button. Our website is sfwmd.gov to get assistance from us. If you're dialed in via phone, to raise your hand, you press *9, and then when you're called on, press *6 to mute and unmute. Thank you. I am going to start with a couple of slides to set the stage, and then before I turn it over to Dr. Wachnicka. As most of you participating know, the governing board adopted a mission statement about 2.5, 3 years ago at this point, and it says to safeguard and restore South Florida's water resources and ecosystems, protect our communities from flooding, and meet the region's water needs while connecting with the public and stakeholders. Obviously, this board put safeguard and restore South Florida's water resources at the top, because that is what the public is absolutely demanding right now, is that we improve water quality and get our resources right. And of course, when Governor DeSantis took over, he signed his executive order 19-12 right when he took over. He established the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, and he really prioritized water quality funding for us, put us on that track. The board he put in place has been carrying out that mission, and also he's been using the Blue-Green Algae Task Force to help guide state policies to really get at water quality and our water resources. One of the first things this governing board did was partner with DEP to expand our monitoring network, which you will get the benefit of a little bit today. But this monitoring network was expanded particularly around Lake Okeechobee, St. Lucie, and Caloosahatchee, so we could get a much better handle on how to control pollution coming into those water bodies, which fuels these algal blooms. And I want to emphasize that we are heavily, heavily focused on controlling pollution, that pollution that fuels these algal blooms. This summer, we started some new technology to try to figure out how to address them when they show up. But our mission and our focus is improving water quality to prevent harmful algal blooms. I want to emphasize that over the past 3 years, the state has dedicated $1.2 billion to South Florida Water Management District in this effort to try to control that water quality. That compared to what we did to try to address algal blooms when they showed up, that was hundreds of thousands, not 1.2 billion. So it is a natural inclination when we start talking about dealing with algal blooms to say it's better to control the source. We absolutely agree. That is what we're focused on, and that's where all of our efforts are. But it certainly is also important when these harmful algal blooms dominate ecosystems to figure out what to do about those, particularly when they're proximal to people and providing that nuisance condition and public health threat. So that is the new stuff we've been trying this summer. That's where I want to get the feedback, is how to deal with those algae, while we, of course, put 99.9% of our focus on controlling pollution. As we talk about algae, please, I wanted to remind everybody that there is a protectingfloridatogether.gov website where folks can monitor algal conditions, you can report algal conditions, and also toxin conditions associated with the algae. It's a very useful website that is used every summer when algal blooms start to show up for us to track, sample, monitor, report, and keep the public informed on what algal conditions are happening. So with that stage set, I think it's time to dive into some science. And Dr. Wachnicka, I'll ask to present the data that she has seen over the summer. Doctor?
Good morning, WRAC members. My name is Anna Wachnicka, and I'm a lead scientist in the Applied Sciences Bureau in the Water Resources Division. And in my presentation, I will focus on harmful algal bloom monitoring and recent conditions, bloom conditions in the lake. I'm going to start with a general overview of what cyanobacteria are. On the left side of the slide, you can see several examples of cyanobacteria species that you can commonly find in the lake. And one of them, Microcystis aeruginosa, is a common bloom-forming species in the lake that you will hear about more in a second. So cyanobacteria in general are ancient group of autotrophic microscopic bacteria. So that means that they can produce their own food just like any other algae and plants. You can find them pretty much in all aquatic systems, fresh, brackish, and marine. And they can form huge colonies composed of hundreds of thousands of cells. Those colonies are easily spotted from the air and by the satellites, which you will see in a second. So the growth and reproduction of cyanobacteria is influenced by many different factors. And cyanobacteria in general, they love stagnant, warm, nutrient-rich waters. So when the conditions are right, they can reproduce really quickly and create those large-scale blooms on the lakes, including Lake Okeechobee. So they also play a very important role in nitrogen cycling in a lake. Some of the species can fix atmospheric nitrogen, and those species are called diazotrophs. And they also have specialized gas vesicles which allow them to move up and down within the water column, which basically allows them to absorb maximum amount of nutrients and light, which they need for growth and reproduction. And cyanobacteria also can survive in extreme environmental conditions, so you can often find them, for example, in hot springs. Several species that you can also find in the lake can produce cyanotoxins, but not all of them. So not all blooms that show up on a lake are really toxic, so just keep that in mind. Some species can also produce unpleasant, earthy taste and odor compounds. So the next topic I would like to discuss are cyanobacteria blooms and factors that fuel the blooms. But before I start describing the blooms, I would like to talk first about algae themselves and cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria and algae are extremely important components of all aquatic systems. They're primary producers, and what that means, they are very important food source for primary consumers. So that means that they're important for, food source for example, zooplankton, crustaceans, or planktivorous fish. So we need algae and we need cyanobacteria in aquatic systems. Blooms are also natural occurring phenomena. So usually every summer when the water gets warmer, cyanobacteria and algae start blooming. So those are natural phenomena. However, when they start growing out of control, and that usually happens in unbalanced systems, that's when they become problematic. So that rapid growth of algae or cyanobacteria that can cause harm to people, animals, and environment, those blooms are, we refer to as harmful algal blooms. However, those blooms, not all blooms, like I said, have to be toxic to be harmful. And I will talk about that in a second. So in order for us to monitor blooms on the lake, we use chlorophyll A as a threshold, 40 micrograms per liter chlorophyll A as a threshold. So any concentrations above 40 micrograms per liter chlorophyll A, we consider as bloom conditions on the lake. So the main factors contributing to bloom formation is, of course, nutrient over-enrichment, and this is happening around the world. And the nutrient over-enrichment is associated with urban and agricultural development. Also, increasing global temperatures will most likely increase the frequency and magnitude of the blooms in the future. And stagnant water conditions is another factor that contributes to bloom formation. Algae can have different colors, as you can see on those pictures. So very typical for Lake Okeechobee are blooms formed by Microcystis aeruginosa. And they have this really bright green color, as you can see on this picture, and kind of streaky appearance. So you can see those blooms easily with naked eye. When the blooms start decomposing, as you can see on this picture, so this picture was taken at the Pahokee Marina, they also can change color. So they can become kind of bluish, and this is because of the pigment, phycocyanin, that they have. So they start releasing this pigment, and you can end up with different colors appearing when that bloom decomposes. So they also can have reddish and bluish appearance. So it all depends what kind of species blooms and also what kind of pigment those species contain. So that will determine the color of the blooms. So why blooms are harmful? So as you can see on this graphic, harmful algal blooms can form surface scam. So that means basically when that layer of algae floats on the water, that decreases light penetration to deeper parts of the water column, which affects other algae and also submerged aquatic vegetation. So when algae from the bloom and or submerged aquatic vegetation dies, everything ends up on the bottom of the lake, and that organic matter starts decomposing. During the composition process, we end up with very low oxygen level in a water column, which basically can affect other organisms living in a lake, that can, for example, lead to fish kills. So, like I mentioned, cyanobacteria have gas vesicles. And thanks to gas vesicles, they can move up and down within the water column. And they can position themselves in an ideal spot when they can get maximum amount of nutrients and light that they need for photosynthesis and basically for growth and reproduction. When they form large colonies, like in case of Microcystis aeruginosa blooms, that surface scam can form just right near the surface, and you can see it easily from the air, and like I said, also from the satellites. So basically the gas bubbles that are produced during the photosynthesis that are filled with oxygen bring those colonies to the surface. And we actually take advantage of that, and we use satellite-based remote sensing technologies for early detection and early monitoring, daily monitoring of blue-green algal blooms on the lake. So this is an example of a NOAA product that basically shows bloom potential on the lake on May 11th. So the redder the color, the higher the bloom potential, and the bluer the color, the lower the bloom potential. So Satellites are extremely useful tool, but they have also limitations. So they shouldn't be used as a replacement for regular water quality monitoring of the lake that we have. It should be used as a complementary tool. Satellites, for example, cannot detect what kind of species blooms. And also, the satellites cannot detect toxin concentrations in the water. They're not quantitative tools. So we only can say whether the bloom potential is high or low. So it's more of a quantitative information, which is also very useful, like I said. So we can use the satellite observation to help us direct monitoring resources towards areas of importance, so that kind of target monitoring to times and locations when cyanobacteria is detected leads to more efficient and effective monitoring program. So here are several examples of the maps produced by NOAA. So this is a history of bloom potential on the lake since the beginning of the wet season. So as you can see, the bloom potential kind of decreased over time on the lake since the beginning of May. So we had the highest bloom potential in May, and then you can see the blooms dissipated. And the reason for that can be simply, precipitation, increasing precipitation that can dilute concentration of algae in the water temporarily. And also wind patterns. So prevailing winds, for example, can sometimes push a biomass towards the shoreline, as you can see on those pictures from late July and early August. So you can see that prevailing winds coming, for example, from southwest direction can push the surface cam towards the northeastern shore, and the winds coming from northeast direction can push the biomass towards the southwestern shore. And sometimes following precipitation, we also receive additional nutrient influxes from the watershed, and the blooms can reemerge even at the end of the wet season, which is basically happening right now. So let's talk about expanded water quality monitoring network that we have in Lake Okeechobee right now, thanks to Governor DeSantis. So we have 32 monitoring stations on the lake, which are marked on this map in a red and green color. And we collect different physical, chemical, and biological water quality data. That data includes, for example, temperature, pH, chlorophyll A, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, inorganic nutrients, and also total nutrient concentrations. We also collect samples for quantitative and qualitative microscopic phytoplankton community structure analysis. And so first we do quick scans and we look what dominant taxa is present in the water, but we also do more quantitative assessment by more detailed enumeration of algae present in the water. In addition to phytoplankton community structure analysis, we also collect samples for toxin analysis. And we collect data on microcystin, cylindrospermopsin, and anatoxin A. The sampling is done by our Water Quality Bureau at the district, and the samples for quantitative and qualitative assessment of phytoplankton community structure are sent to Tallahassee, and also for toxin analysis are sent to Tallahassee, and Florida Department of Environmental Protection is conducting those analysis and shares data with us later on. We also, in addition to regular monitoring on the lake, we also have 6 near real-time water quality monitoring stations on the lake, which are marked on this map as buoys, although the sensors are not necessarily attached to buoys. Some are attached to permanent weather platforms that we have on the lake. So it's a combination of buoys and permanent stations on the weather stations. So the sensors are attached at some locations near the surface and near the bottom. and at other locations only near the surface. And this is because some sites are just too shallow for us, to attach sensors near the bottom. So that's the only reason we don't have those sensors near the bottom at some of the locations. So during the winter time, which is basically the dry season, which starts on November 1st and ends on at the end of April, we collect data from only 9 monitoring stations, which are marked on the map as shown on the map as green dots. And during the summer, during the wet season, we collect samples from all 32 water quality monitoring stations on bi-weekly basis, meaning twice per month, while during the dry season only on monthly basis. So before I start discussing patterns of chlorophyll A, toxins, and dominant taxa on the lake that we collected since the beginning of the wet season, I would like to quickly discuss historic patterns of water quality and chlorophyll A on the lake. So chlorophyll A is a proxy for phytoplankton biomass. So basically, I will be talking about how patterns that are typical patterns on the lake of phytoplankton biomass. So let's start with water quality. So these divisions are based on 21 years of data. So 21 years of water quality data, and that data included data on temperature, chlorophyll A, Secchi depth, inorganic nutrients, total suspended solids, turbidity, dissolved oxygen, pH. We were able to distinguish 4 different clusters of sites on the lake and 2 different sites which had distinct water quality. So the analysis that were done, we used cluster analysis to distinguish those clusters. And then the clusters were superimposed on the principal component analysis ordination diagram, which you can see here. And the arrows basically show the parameters, water quality parameters that contribute to separation of those sites in the multidimensional scale. And those clusters are shown here on the map. So you can see that, this northeastern part and western part of the lake have a different water quality than the transitional zone or sites in the central part of the lake. So let's look now a little bit closer, take a closer look at the historic patterns in phytoplankton biomass. I group the sites also by clusters. So on the y-axis, so this is a heat map. And on the y-axis, you can see all the long-term water quality monitoring sites that are marked on this map as different color dots. And on the x-axis, we have months. And so basically, as you can see, the cluster number 2, which is that transitional zone, has, on average, the highest phytoplankton biomass. Also, sites in northern part of the lake and western and northwestern part of the lake, as you can see, especially during the summer, have elevated chlorophyll A concentrations, higher concentration than, for example, sites in cluster 3 and 4, which are basically the sites located in the central part of the lake. So why is that? So if we just quickly go back to the slide, you can see that sites in that transitional zone are usually warmer. They have higher water clarity and usually elevated chlorophyll A data compared to the sites in that central part of the lake, which usually have higher turbidity and higher concentration of nutrients and lower chlorophyll A concentrations. So on this diagram, dots that are located closer to each other have similar water quality, while dots that are dots that are located farther away from each other have different water quality. So basically, you already can see that the water quality is completely different in that transitional zone compared to the water quality in that central part of the lake. So let's now switch to the more recent data. And on this map, I gather all the data that we collected since the beginning of May. So we collected so far 288 samples since the beginning of May until the beginning, early September. And this map basically shows the number of bloom events per site that were recorded at each of the locations since the beginning of May. So you can see that out of 9 surveys that we conducted since May until the beginning of September, these 3 locations had 6 times had bloom conditions. And looking at the entire map, you also can see that basically that northern part of the lake had higher number of bloom events than that central part of the lake, because that central part of the lake, which has unconsolidated sediments, can tend to also have higher turbidity, which means basically less light availability for phytoplankton growth and reproduction. So the lower light availability basically inhibits growth of algae and cyanobacteria in that central part of the lake, where those sites are shallower and receive nutrients from the watershed, and those are just ideal, almost ideal conditions for cyanobacteria growth in that northern part of the bay, of the lake. So on this graph, I would like to show you the percentage of bloom events per sampling event. So you also can see that we had, percentage-wise, we had more bloom conditions early in the season, and the percentage of bloom events per sampling event, which you can see on the x-axis, decreased over time. So approximately 24% of the samples out of 288 samples that we collected from the beginning of May had bloom conditions on the lake. So those are the results from the last 3 surveys. So basically, this is the early August, late August, and early September survey. So in early August, we have bloom conditions in that northeastern part of the lake and the southwestern part of the lake. And you can see that in late August, the conditions persisted in the southern part of the lake only. And in early September, only two sites had bloom conditions. So that red color on a pie chart also show you percentage-wise the number or the percentage of sites with bloom conditions, as you can see, decreased since the beginning of August. So let's look at microcystin concentrations. So those 2 maps show, this map shows number of samples per site with concentrations above detection limit. For microcystin, detection limit is 0.25 micrograms per liter. And this map shows number of samples per site with concentrations above EPA recreational standard, which is 8 micrograms per liter. And you can clearly see that, again, the number of samples per site in that northern part of the lake that we collected since the beginning of May was higher, in terms of the number of samples with the concentration above the detection limit were higher in that northern part of the lake compared to southern part of the lake. And if we look at the EPA standard, only the sites in that northeastern part of the lake and southwestern part of the lake had at least 3 samples with concentrations above 8 micrograms per liter. So looking at this graph, again, on the x-axis we have the surveys, and you can see that the percentage of sites with a concentration above 8 micrograms per liter, so above that EPA standard, decreased over time. and the number of sites with concentrations below detection level increased, except for the last two surveys when numbers of sites with concentration above detection level increased again. And this was most likely due to the precipitation events that we had that brought some extra nutrients from the watershed, which could temporarily stimulate primary productivity in a lake. So the highest microcystin concentration that we detected since the beginning of the wet season was 440 micrograms per liter, and it was detected in southwestern part of the lake at Palm Out 3 location. And the concentration of toxins were also higher at the beginning of the wet season compared to the later times or later events in a season. So again, those are results of the last 3 surveys. So you can see that the number of sites with concentration below detection limit decreased slightly since the beginning of August. And again, that was most likely due to the temporal influx of nutrients from the watershed following precipitation. But only one site in September had concentration above the EPA 8 micrograms per liter standard. So let's look at the dominant taxa now. So this map shows the percentage of dominant taxa per site. So different colors represent different species, and the blue colors are mixed communities. The bright green color is a microcystin aeruginosa. So you can see that basically that northeastern part of the lake and the central part of the lake, those sites, the dominant taxa that was most frequently recorded at those sites since the beginning of May was Microcystis aeruginosa. While if you look at the sites located in the nearshore areas, those sites often had communities dominated by different species, often those that can fix atmospheric nitrogen, or had mixed communities. So why is it important to mention that we also have cyanobacteria that can fix atmospheric nitrogen? Well, as you will see in a second, the concentration of nutrients in the water decreased since the beginning of the wet season. So they get lower over time. And this is because algae use all the nutrients available in the water. So Microcystis aeruginosa, for example, which is the most common bloom-forming species on the lake, cannot fix atmospheric nitrogen. But for example, Cylindrospermopsis raciborski can. So at the end of the wet season, we often can see that some sites, the communities at some locations are dominated or have dominant taxa. The dominant taxa is Cylindrospermopsis raciborski. And when it fixes atmospheric nitrogen, it converts it to ammonia, and that form of nitrogen can be used by species like, for example, Microcystis aeruginosa that cannot fix atmospheric nitrogen. So at the end of the season, the blooms of Microcystis aeruginosa can be sustained thanks to the diazotrophic species that fix atmospheric nitrogen and convert it to more usable forms of nitrogen for the cyanobacteria species that cannot fix the atmospheric form of nitrogen. So here on this graph, again, on the x-axis, those are the sampling events. And you can clearly see that the number or the percentage of sites with Microcystis aeruginosa as a dominant taxa or taxon decreased over time since the beginning of May, and the percentage of mixed communities increased. So this pie chart basically shows that 61% of samples that we collected since the beginning of May had communities dominated by Microcystis aeruginosa, and 31 or almost 32% had mixed communities. So those are the last 3 surveys. So again, you can see that northeastern part of the lake, those sites were dominated in August by Microcystis aeruginosa, and the nearshore sites had more mixed communities. And again, this is because the concentration of nutrients was already lower at those nearshore locations, so that's not a good news for Microcystis aeruginosa. So let's look at the nutrient concentration. So this is the long-term record of dissolved inorganic nitrogen. So on the y-axis, those are the concentrations of nitrogen, and we're looking at the data since June 2019 until September 2021. So you clearly can see that dissolved inorganic nitrogen is historically higher in the pelagic zone, so those are the deeper water sites, and lower in that nearshore zone. And this is because, usually the nearshore zone, as you can see on this slide, has higher concentration of phytoplankton that use all the available nutrients in the water. And you can clearly also see that usually the concentration of dissolved inorganic nitrogen decreases in a wet season. And again, this is because the algae use, especially cyanobacteria, they rely on, cyanobacteria like, for example, Microcystis aeruginosa, rely on dissolved inorganic nitrogen available in the water. So right now, the concentrations of both dissolved inorganic nitrogen and also phytoplankton biomass is pretty low in both zones. And this is really not surprising because we are approaching the end of the bloom season. So cyanobacteria usually are the most abundant group of phytoplanktonic organisms in a lake during the summer. But they actually are outcompeted by, for example, diatoms during the winter time. So that's where basically the changes in the concentrations are, related to the abundance of phytoplankton in the water. And this is what I have. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So we will we'll go ahead and go on to Rory, and we'll save it for the discussion. Any questions and thoughts that WRAC participants may have, we'll save till the next agenda item. So Rory, take it away.
Thank you, Drew. Good morning. My name is Rory Feeney. I'm the Land Resources Bureau Chief here at the Water Management District. I'm pleased to be here today to present an overview of the district's science-based mitigation and deployment of innovative technologies to address blue-green algae associated with Lake Okeechobee and the Central and Southern Florida project. In April of this year, the staff at the South Florida Water Management District were tasked to develop strategies to respond to the growing harmful algal blooms around Lake Okeechobee. This effort could not be accomplished without the strong support and enhanced coordination from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and many other state and federal agencies. Having come from the operational side of the district, the Land Resources Bureau is familiar with tackling complex environmental projects, drawing upon several disciplines. A central principle that we drew upon to confront harmful algal blooms came from the integrated pest management model, seen here on the right, used for controlling invasive and exotic plants. Using multiple tools from different approaches can provide the most effective responses to ecosystem stressors. So with that, we began to build our toolbox. Our coordination with state and federal agencies grew fourfold, from the fast tracking of necessary permits to the daily and weekly interagency meetings. It was nothing less than impressive. The district and DEP augmented their routine water quality monitoring with additional grab samples and visual monitoring to give the most up-to-date data. We knew that the situation would also call for a multitude of different contractors, each bringing unique approaches, such as mechanical removal of harmful algal blooms, pumps to increase circulation, and algicides to further break down the cyanobacteria. Some of these technologies have been used for many years, and other innovations would need to be tested for their applicability and effectiveness. And of course, we need to be transparent with our operations and engage the public throughout the process. Once we had our toolbox in place, we needed to develop a rapid response plan. This flow chart shows how we use water quality and weather data described by Dr. Washnicka to decide when and where to deploy our contractors and which treatment method to use. One of the key decision points is whether there are discharges to the coastal estuaries. And while we have contingencies in place to treat canals prior to discharge, it's important to note that these response plans I'll mention today do not replace the need for critical nutrient-reducing projects championed by Governor DeSantis and implemented by state and federal agencies. These response plans are mitigating actions to treat harmful algal blooms in populated areas and not a campaign on all species of algae. Algae is an important part of the food chain and is the fabric of aquatic ecosystems. In fact, only a few species of algae produce toxins. Over the coming slides, I'll be reviewing 4 unique projects where the district deployed several treatment methods. The goal for each of these projects was not only to mitigate the impacts of harmful algal blooms, but to test drive novel ideas and learn whether each were effective and scalable to a larger setting. So let's begin with our efforts on the Caloosahatchee River. In May of this year, the district, in partnership with FDEP, hired Blue Green Water Technologies to oversee and coordinate the mitigation of harmful algal blooms in a defined section of the C-43 canal. The mitigation protocols utilize an algicide called Lake Ardoxy. This is a formulation of sodium percarbonate that turns into hydrogen peroxide when applied to water. The hydrogen peroxide reacts with the cyanobacteria in the upper layers of the water due to a special coating that allows the product to float for a few hours. This formulation may reduce the overall amount of active ingredient used on a per acre basis. The contractor performed 112 applications of Lake Ardoxy in 56 different locations between S79 and S78 along 48 miles of the Caloosahatchee River. These applications provided immediate relief for the local residents, and the treatment eliminated cyanobacterial scum and the associated odor, as well as other unpleasant conditions within 24 to 48 hours. The photos in this slide clearly demonstrate the product's ability to reduce the visible scum in a matter of hours to days. As you can see in these photos in the top left, before treatment, and then after treatment the next day. Again, before treatment on the right, and then after treatment 2 days later. We found the best results were gained in areas with stagnant water, such as dead-end canals and marinas. This slide represents a spot treatment performed around Franklin Lock during May of this year. The data results from this work showed a sharp decline in microcystin levels following treatment, with a rebound on the 4th day, suggesting that retreatment using this formulation would be necessary for continued maintenance. Before treatment, microcystin levels were at 8.2, and then a precipitous drop thereafter with a slight rebound. On to a different location. As well, back in May of this year, visible BGA, blue-green algae, was observed along sections of the L10 and L12 canals in western Palm Beach County. We saw an opportunity to test out the application of a different algicide called PAC-27. This product is also a hydrogen peroxide formulation. Under flow conditions, our contractor treated approximately 10 miles of these canals, working from the north of the S5A structure towards S352. And that structure is located on the southeast section of Lake Okeechobee. Water quality was done before, during, and after treatment, and as expected, microcystin levels dropped following treatment. The district staff jumped to action when harmful algal blooms took over the Pahokee Marina back in April of this year. Using the integrated management tools I mentioned earlier, we quickly mobilized our team. We needed to mechanically remove the top layer of decaying scum first. That was the first step. The photo on the left shows an aquatic weed harvester here, modified with a vacuum pump. Working section by section, the contractor was able to get a considerable amount of the biomass removed. The solids were separated out using a filtration system shown here on the right. The water was processed and treated with ozone, and the remaining solids were taken to a landfill away from surface water to be naturally broken down by sunlight. To prevent a rebound in blue-green algae at the marina, the district contractors treated the area with algicide. The area was retreated within a week. Throughout this campaign, we utilized our in-house drone pilots to survey the marina and verify our treatments. The photos on the right show the before and after initial treatment. And I can say we're pretty excited to have this type of technology in-house now. We know that stagnant waters help stimulate algal growth. To eliminate those conditions at the marina, the West Palm Beach Field Station deployed a 6-inch portable pump to move water through the marina's most stagnant areas. We had to try a few different positions and angles to get it right until we began seeing positive results. Continuing to use the integrated management model, we worked with a company called DPI to pilot a new technology using ultrasonic sound waves. As Dr. Washington mentioned, many species of blue-green algae have evolved to control their buoyancy. As the availability of light and nutrients change with the time of day and weather conditions, these cells move up and down the water column. This technology is believed to target that specific biological function. These ultrasonic transducers emit sound waves from an apparatus that sits just under the water surface and converts electrical energy into sound energy. These sound waves are inaudible to the human ear and are thought to hit the harmonic value of the single algal cell, causing cellular wall damage and preventing the cyanobacteria from reproducing. Without sunlight, the cyanobacteria dies off and it's consumed through microbial breakdown. So this photo on the right here depicts the locations of the 4 sonicators, or also called ultrasonic transducers. And they have a radius of about 500 feet, so there's certainly overlap, but they can only really work with direct line of sight. So as soon as those sound waves hit a obstruction, that's the terminal end of their effectiveness. These photos show areas of the Pahokee Marina where sections of sheet wall were removed. As you can see on this photo on the left here, this triangle section is pretty much acting like a catcher's mitt for blue-green algae. And the location here on the right was a beneficial area that would help conveyance moving water out of the marina. So with that, working with the City of Pahokee and the district engineers, a contractor was hired to remove those specific sections of sheet wall. Seeing the results from the portable 6-inch pump and knowing that its deployment was only temporary, a more permanent fix for water movement was needed. So we kicked around some ideas, and these electrical circulators used for de-icing marinas in the northern states seemed like a logical idea. By installing these circulators in a series throughout the marina, we hope to move water through the cutouts along the seawall here. And I'm going to attempt to get some video moving here. That noise in the background is the portable pump that was going to be demobilized. That's not actually the sound of those circulators. The circulators are quite quiet. another location. This was a critical area where we saw lots of blue-green algae buildup, and so you can see it just moving the water where it once was not. And then this is the final stop, the last circulator that pushes the water out of the marina. So while we're uncertain how each of these technologies contributed to the precipitous drop in microcystin, we believe the totality of our efforts really helped during this time period. The data sets here on screen show the level of microcystin levels going from over 24 micrograms per liter to below detectable limits at time. The last location I'll discuss today is our response to BGA blooms by the S308 structure at the head of the C44 canal. At the end of June, BGA blooms began to take over the lock structure and the S308 gate here. We immediately deployed our contractor to treat the area with Lake Oxy that aldehyde I spoke of before, and what was used on the Caloosahatchee River. The treatment area is approximately 25 acres, even though the worst of the algae, thank you. Thank you. And the worst of the algae bloom was located here. We did treat the peripheral areas to a total of about 25 acres. Conditions improved following the treatment, and Mother Nature cooperated with a series of cloudy days and favorable winds. And that's important to note. Winds play a considerable role in how and if we respond. What can be there on Monday may not be there the very next day. And this is the product at work right here, immediately after treatment. The district had also installed an ultrasonic transducer just east of Connors Highway along the C44, concurrent with our efforts at the Pahokee Marina. This yellow circle here shows the theoretical treatment area of the transducer that reaches about 500 feet or so in radius in either direction until it reaches an obstruction. We have found that the chlorophyll A has remained low in the area and average around 10 to 18 micrograms per liter. But there has been some phycocyanin concentrations along the shoreline, probably pushed up due to wind and water currents. And most recently, we deployed a second transducer on the actual structure, the S308 structure, to test the efficacy in the area west of Connors Highway. That transducer was deployed in unison with the set of water quality parameters to test DO, pH, specific conductivity, temperature, chlorophyll A, phycocyanin, turbidity, and a suite of other parameters. That data is currently logging, but will be available via telemetry over the coming weeks. Our next step for the next few months until we get into the next season is to really look back at all the water quality and treatment data that was collected over the last 6 months, further refine our rapid response plan efforts, continue to evaluate new technologies, engage our contractors on supply chain and their readiness for next year, and coordinate with partnering agencies on our strategies. So it really took many, many people across the state to pull off this effort. I'd like to thank the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the Corps of Engineers, the City of Pahokee, and the St. John's Water Management District, as well as our awesome blue-green algae team here at the district, made up of many people across the district, including the Vegetation Management Section, Water Quality, Applied Sciences, modeling, field operations, budget and procurement, public relations, and the executive office. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Rory. So I hope that gave a pretty good overview for everybody on some of the efforts and data that were undertaken this summer while we were dealing with these harmful algae blooms. What I would like to do is open it up to the WRAC Forum participants for any questions, thoughts, ideas to talk about. And so I will let you, if you need to, if you want to participate, please use the raise hand feature. Or if you're participating via phone, which I don't think any of you are, then hit star 9 to raise your hand. So I'll first engage the WRAC participants, and then we'll take public comment after this discussion on agenda item number 5. So the first hand I have raised is from Inger Hansen from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
Hi, this is Inger. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Impressive presentations today. Thank you so much, Anna. You're so smart. Anna Vakni, I can never say your last name right. I apologize. But thank you for educating us all on the basics of algae blooms and sharing the data and getting us to look at the data on a spatial scale and the way that you do the analysis and kind of get us to understand the whole thing better. Really, really good educational presentations. Also, Rory, thank you for sharing your toolbox and your how you go about actually doing your rapid response plans. And it's really interesting, some of these technologies that's coming out of the innovative technology projects that we at DEP have been help fund. And part of it comes from the funding from the legislator and the efforts by our governor. As you mentioned, Drew, Executive Order 1912 actually initiated all of this. And for the last 3 years, fiscal years, we've been getting funding. About 10 million, it was the first year, 5 million, it was the second year. And this year, we got another 10 million for these innovative grants that, and we're looking to also request another funding next year of 10 million. So I'm so glad to see that the innovative grants are actually being used right, that we're helping to build our toolbox, and I'm very impressed with what was presented today. Thank you.
Thank you, Inger. It's good to hear from you. Next, I'll call on Lee Hefty from Miami-Dade County, Durham.
Thank you. So Lee Hefty, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Interesting presentation, thank you. I just was interested in the technology for removing the algae from the system, filtering, and how much residence time do you need for the water before you can return it back to the lake? Do you need a lot of volume off-site, or is it possible to do almost like a flow-through system where you can get the water right back into the lake?
Thank you for the question. So it wasn't, we didn't utilize a flow-through system. There was surprisingly not as much water collected out of that process as I thought. The water was separated and then ozonated and only discharged once the water was tested for microcystin counts. But it was a slow process, to be honest. It did take several days to do that. And whether or not that's scalable to larger areas is yet to be seen. But you do pose an interesting question whether or not that can be done in line.
Yeah, because I've heard you obviously have to filter it properly and make sure you're not breaking the the algae up and having them essentially, create more of a problem in the waterway. But I'm thinking about some of the challenges we have here in Biscayne Bay, and if we ever have that in some of these marine areas within the bay, is it possible to use a similar technology to recover of some of it, and how much dewatering would be required? That's what I was asking, but I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Next, we have Richard Pinsky.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you to Anna and Rory. I have two questions, and one is a causation question. But first, and maybe it's for Anna on her presentation. I'm interested in the modeling. So obviously, very impressive and kind of way over my head for a lot of the monitoring presentation, but I will sleep better at night knowing what we're doing. My question on the modeling is, what's the next step after the monitoring? How far in advance? When we have a low pressure, they're able to model, they're able to say, there's going to be a tropical storm formed, and then we're going to have a hurricane. So how far in advance, when we see the first signs of an algal bloom forming, obviously where, but then how far in advance, and then when do we jump into action? Do we know a week ahead of time that it's going to be a big harmful algae bloom? How does the modeling play into that towards our response?
Thank you so much for the question. We currently actually do not have good modeling tools for the lake, but NOAA is developing those tools for us in collaboration with Army Corps of Engineers, and we are hoping to develop forecasting tools where we will be able to make short and longer term forecasts, like weekly and also seasonal forecast based on the conditions, not only that we have on the lake, but also we want to include data on weather and prevailing winds, precipitations, projected precipitation data. But we currently do not have those forecasting tools, unfortunately. So at this moment, we're trying to just look at use the NOAA products that I showed you today and current data that we're collecting from the lake. And that data will be used to develop the forecasting tools in the near future. So we are waiting for that forecasting tool that will be very similar to what was developed actually for Lake Erie. So NOAA actually developed forecasting tool for Lake Erie, and we're hoping that they are gonna also develop similar tool for us here for Lake Okeechobee. Thank you.
So,
Richard.
So it's an issue that that the tools, the forecasting and the modeling tools are in development, they don't exist yet, or is it a funding issue? What maybe Drew can answer the question, or you, Anna?
It's not a funding issue. It's a analytical issue that NOAA needs the time to develop the model, put the calibrations together, those types of things. We would love to have it now. So in the interim, what we have done is trying to get more. As you can see, the data has a lot of, it's very good coverage of data. So what we're trying to do is improve the timing of the data. So one of the things we purchased and have installed, I think this week or last week, is real-time nitrate sensors on our buoys in the lake so that we can see those nitrate conditions. That was the available nutrients for microcystis. And if we see those conditions elevating at the same time the sun is coming out and the things are warming up, then we'll have more real-time information to share and use in anticipation of algal blooms for the coming season.
Okay, thank you. So my next question is on the causation. And I know this presentation today was more surrounding monitoring and then when the algal blooms form. But do we know the contributing factor in particular? I'm interested in the legacy nutrients that reside perhaps in the deeper parts of the lake. What what percent, or do we have any idea how much of a contributing factor that is? And if it is a contributing factor, has a innovative technology or mitigation of a test area where we actually go in, I know it's costly, but we scrape and remove a couple of feet of muck or something at the bottom to see if that reduces the formation of the algal blooms.
Try that.
Okay, so I'm gonna take this question. So it's never just one factor. It's a combination of multiple different factors that contribute to bloom formation. As you remember from my presentation, that central part of the lake that has those unconsolidated sediments, that can easily be disturbed by winds, and we can have some nutrients coming out of the sediments. However, at the same time, because there's the light environment in the water is so poor, that inhibits actually algal growth in that central part of the lake. But again, it's never just one factor that contributes to development of blooms. It's a multiple different factors. It's nutrients, the light environment, whether water is stagnant or not. Looking at the data, you can clearly see that it's not just nutrients. If you don't have light, the algae will not be able to grow because those are photoautotrophic organisms. So they need also light in addition to nutrients to actually form those blooms. So the legacy phosphorus that you mentioned, it's hard to say whether that will help or not, but obviously, the less nutrients we have in the lake, the better. But we are taking, we have all kinds of efforts right now that are aimed at nutrient reduction. So there's less nutrients coming from the watershed already, and hopefully we'll be able to deal with legacy nutrients in the future as well. Thank you.
Okay, great, and thank you very much. I didn't invent that, and I didn't make that up. I'm not that smart, but I have read of certain smaller water bodies, even canals, where the muck and the legacy nutrients have been scraped off the bottom, and the results have been fantastic. So that's why I was asking if that's something applicable to either our canals or portions of the lake. So anyway, thank you very much. Great presentation. And thank you, Drew, for allowing me the time to ask the questions.
Certainly. Thank you, Richard. Next, we have Jeff Mullins.
Hi, good morning. Everyone hear me?
Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, good morning. Director Bartlett, district staff, fellow WRAC members. Jeff Mullins again from the Everglades Foundation. No questions for me today, but just a few comments. Let me start by thanking the district and DEP for not only the great presentation this morning, but for really all your efforts through the summer, as you've outlined this morning, to respond to and react to these harmful algal blooms. But also, as you rightly point out, being proactive on monitoring water quality and the root causes of this toxic scourge that we seemingly more frequently have to deal with more and more. Your efforts are very much valued and appreciated, and the governor's prioritization of this and the investment to water quality has been critical. I love seeing the examples from Mr. Feeney's presentation in particular regarding the different approaches and technologies to mitigate these harmful algal blooms. I strongly believe in encouraging and investing in innovation and collaboration across the public and private sector, and that will continue to be critical to staying on the offensive to attack this problem. I would endorse the idea of having a water quality proving ground, so to speak, established by the state that would be dedicated to fostering the science, collaboration, and innovation that will continue to be needed to be developed. And importantly, one that can help accelerate the testing and the scalability of any new technology so that they can be put into the field as quickly as possible. But when we talk about root causes and effects, I think it's also important to talk about and point out the rules around water management and how the lake is operated. as having a tremendous impact on the proliferation of these harmful algal blooms and our ability to significantly reduce their discharges. As changes to that operational process have been unfolding and are coming into focus, let me commend the district, this governing board, and the governor on the emphasis for a balanced approach to correct the inequities of the current system, one that shares benefit and adversity and provides more beneficial releases. Sending more water south during the dry season is key, and to allow for flexibility to avoid harmful discharges in the northern estuaries. Quite simply, the status quo of the current system is broken and inequitable. Now is the time for water equity. So there is enough water for everyone, and it should be distributed accordingly, including sending more water south during the dry season. This will not only benefit water supply for 5 million Floridians, create more storage capacity in the lake during the wet season, improve Everglades habitat in the dry season, but also help address some of the root causes and effects issues that we've been discussing here today. And that is reducing harmful discharges of the toxic algae to the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers. With that, I'll conclude my comments, but again, thank you all very much for what you're doing on this front. It is very valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Sorry, my computer. Next, I'll call on Herb Rayborn from Walt Disney. Thank you, Herb.
Two very interesting and timely presentations. I do have really two questions based more out of curiosity than anything else. And so for Anna, I am curious, the two sampling locations, L001 and LZ2, that were not able to be grouped with any of the others. Just curious, any thoughts on why that is the case, or why that was the case, I should say?
Thank you for the question. I think it's just the location. If you look, this is those locations are located. Those two sites are located in northern part of the lake, and where we have a lot of water coming from the Kisibi River, and that water brings also not only nutrients but also dissolved inorganic material and chromophoric dissolved organic material. So, it's just the water that comes from other sources that makes those sites, in large amounts, that make those sites very, very unique in terms of water quality. It's just basically the location.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. I was kind of thinking that. And then, Rory, I had a question on why ozone was chosen in the work done at the Pahokee Marina.
You're referring to when the BGA scum was physically removed and the resulting water was treated with ozone. Ozone is a typical method used to treat drinking water. It's commonly used in drinking water facilities to sterilize drinking water. And so that's for that reason. It is very effective on microcystin. As it's also being used currently by Florida Gulf Coast University in their nanobubble technology that they also have deployed at Pahokee currently. So for those reasons, that's why it was used.
Yeah, based on my experience, Herb, when you're trying to remove algae and be able to deal with the byproducts, removing the toxin is the big trick, so that you can deal with the toxin, and ozone seems to be the most effective technology at taking the toxin down.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so that's very helpful. Thank you. Very informative. Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, next we have James Evans from SCCF.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. This is a great topic. Director Bartlett, I really appreciate you putting this together. And Anna and Rory, great presentations, extremely informative. Drew, I really want to compliment you on how you opened up the presentation. I really appreciate your opening comments and the fact that the district and the state are focused on source control. Of course, source control is what we need to be focused on. Addressing the nutrients at the source before they get into the water bodies in the first place, that's really critical moving forward. And we appreciate your continued focus on that. Hopefully with the update to the statewide stormwater rule, improved best management practices for both agricultural and urban land uses, that will help address some of these sources. But we also appreciate that you are looking at mitigating these harmful algal blooms once they're already in bloom form, because they really do need to be addressed. And we're really excited to see some of the technology that you guys are using to address and mitigate these blooms. I did have one simple question, maybe it's not such a simple question, regarding the fate of the nutrients after these treatments are implemented, and how the release of those nutrients after it's been treated might affect other harmful algal blooms downstream. For example, in the Caloosahatchee, the blooms in 2018, there's a lot of science that points to the fact that the nutrients that were released from blue-green algae blooms, once those blooms reached the saline waters and those cells lysed and the nutrients were released, were likely taken up by red tide, Carnea brevis, and likely enhanced those blooms in our coastal waters. And I was just curious if Anna or Rory or anyone else had any data on how those nutrients, what form those nutrients are in once they're released after these technologies break down those blooms, and what the fate of those nutrients are in the coastal estuaries.
I'm going to look around. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, but when you apply the lake guard oxy, it does break down the algae and everything. The one concern is what does it do to the toxin that's inside the algae? So that's why we monitored and saw that knocked back because of the conditions of the water being in a hyperoxidative state. It's my understanding that when the cells break down, the nutrients within those cells stay in the organic form. They don't necessarily go to an inorganic, so it's still the same type of nutrient in the water column. So I don't know if I got Lawrence and Stewart and Dr. Wachnicka here. Do you have any more insight on that kind of fate of nutrients?
So I'm going to take this question a little bit. So we currently do not have data. We didn't look at how much nutrients were released from those cells after the treatment. But nutrients are usually recycled within the system. So once the algae die, whether we, after treating them with, ozone or other products, or not, they eventually die. So they eventually would die and decompose whether we would treat them or not. So they just get recycled.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate the explanation. And yeah, that's obviously our concerns remain. That we're not getting rid of those nutrients. We're mitigating the blooms themselves, but of course, we can expect that those nutrients are still in the system and would be available to harmful algal blooms downstream. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. As we mitigate these blooms and we manage water and we move water around the system, we do have to keep in mind that while we can mitigate them in one part of the system, we have to keep an eye out for impacts in other parts of the system. So thank you for all the work you guys are doing. It's great, and very, very informative presentations today. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Next, I'm going to go to Lieutenant Colonel Todd Polk with the Army Corps.
Firstly, thank you, Director Bartlett. Appreciate you and the staff for putting on this important topic and great presentations by Dr. Wachnicka and Roy. Thank you so much. Just want to make 3 quick comments for everyone. I appreciate all of our teams. Just to give kind of quick shout out to our team, Jim Riley and the environmental branch, and all the work that they do hand in glove, I think, with you at the district, as well as DEP and other agencies around the state, to keep a close eye on the blue-green algae and the algae as it forms and the status of it across obviously across the lake and throughout the canals and the lock structures. I do want to also just make sure everyone's aware, as we had yesterday a great PDT meeting with LOSOM, and just remind everyone that the goals for LOSOM when it comes to blue-green algae is, we're looking to start fresh and simplify what we're doing, be more intuitive for our decision makers and all the stakeholders, and incorporate complexity where it helps to achieve the performance objectives. And of course, reducing the amount of discharges that we see, and excited for what's coming ahead under the LOSOM. And then thirdly, just to give one quick update, ERDIC, that's our Engineering Research Development Center coming out of Vicksburg, Mississippi. They were out on the lake last year doing a lot of sampling and research, and then we expect them back this next spring to take a good look. And they've been trying to find some ways to convert algae into biofuels and seeing how they can possibly pull it out of the water as well. So just again, appreciated a fantastic discussion this morning, and look forward to listening to more. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Next, Grant Lanham, sugarcane growers. Thanks for participating.
Hello. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We hear you.
Okay, great. All right. I had myself on mute. First off, I just want to thank Dr. Wachanika and Mr. Feenan for their presentations. It was very impressive data presented, and the Caloosahatchee treatment for the algae blooms with the algicide. Very, very good presentations. I like that. I just have one comment and one question. First, my question. I know in Dr. Wachanika's presentation, there was reference to, the data that was looked at, I think was from water year 2000 to 2020. Do we have data prior to that that would be useful in looking at it as far as, how many algae blooms have occurred over the last 30, 40, 50 years? Is that data available?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the data is available at some location. We can date back up to, I think, 60s and 70s even. For this particular analysis, we only used 21 years of data because the data were available from all those 16 locations. And that was the goal, to look at as many locations across the lake as possible. But yes, some locations have longer records, so we could possibly look separately at each site, basically separately at the longer records of chlorophyll A, which is the proxy of phytoplankton biomass.
Right. Yeah, understood. So you're trying to make sure you're comparing apples to apples in your data set.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. And then my comment, I just think, and some of the other commenters have alluded to, upstream, the causes of these algae blooms, and I think we need to increase community awareness on, items like converting septic systems. I know there's some state programs for helping people convert their septic systems over to a sewer, and then also communicate restrictions on. Like homeowner fertilizer applications. I know a lot of cities, municipalities have different fertilizer restrictions on different times of the year depending on where you're at. So I just think that the majority of people don't understand that, and I think if we engaged in a community awareness type campaign and made people more aware of, minimizing their fertilizer use on their yards, et cetera, I think that would go a long way. And that's all the comments I had. Again, thank you everybody for your presentations. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Grant. Next we have Dr. Aubrey Arrington, Loxahatchee River District.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can.
Excellent, thank you. I enjoyed the presentations, both of them, and I actually started my career at the district and sampled most of those Lake Okeechobee sites, so it's kind of fun going down memory lane there. I'm curious for Anna, looking at the spatial distribution of the samples, I enjoyed the approach and analysis. I'm just trying to remember the map. I didn't screenshot it or anything. There were two specific areas where you had a series of sampling sites in like close sequence going from near shore to offshore. And I thought that those two sample areas were really interesting when thinking about the spatial dynamics, and you could clearly see the point of the sample sites near the littoral edge, and you could see those areas as being ripe for having algae blooms. So I really want, and there's only so much you can say in a presentation like this, but I really wonder how much those kind of transect areas have been explored, trying to think about what's going on, driving the differences as you move spatially from inshore to offshore. I think one was off of like Indian Prairie Canal general area, maybe named Pole or something. And then, so that's just a question and appreciation for both good presentations. Or a comment, that was a comment. Then a question, specific question is, has there been any spatial analysis done looking at the spatial application of aquatic herbicide relative to the spatial occurrence of algae blooms and the timing? We know that whenever the herbicide's being applied to kill invasive or problematic vegetation, that vegetation dies, the cells lyse, and they release labile compounds into the water column. And I'm very curious if the district has mapped out the spatial application of herbicide relative to timing, and then evaluated the spatial distribution of algae blooms, and in particular, you know, the ones that we're talking about here, the harmful blooms, and tried to look and see if there is any collinearity or correlation between the herbicide application, the death of that vegetation, the release of those labile compounds into the water column, and then uptake by algae. Thank you very much.
So fortunately, I've got Dr. Washnika and Rory Feeney, who have familiarity with both exotics control and water quality. I'm not sure that we have the data resolution to look at that. Do you know, Rory or Anna?
Not any correlation, no.
Okay. So I mean, that could be one of those research ideas, Dr. Arrington, if that's, you know, so but does anybody have any insight into whether there's any data out there for that?
I personally did not look at the data, and I'm not aware whether there is, but yes, I agree. It's an interesting question and suggestion, maybe another research topic for the future. So we don't have this data. Well, I personally did not look into that data yet.
All right, I'm going to take that as as something to look at, Dr. Arrington.
I'm totally good with that.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, anything else from the WRAC participants? Well, thank you so much for your engagement. I'm going to turn it over to listen to the public now, and Yvette, I'll turn it over to you to call for public comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane Goldberg.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to participate. I have two questions. The first is, what studies have been done to see what effects the ultrasonic transducers and chemical treatments have on wildlife, the zooplankton, fish and shellfish, and even the mammals? I mean, I don't know if you get dolphins and manatees or otters or whatever other, or even birds in the area. The second question is, when you kill the microcystin, do these treatments also kill the phytoplanktons that are needed to feed the marine wildlife?
Thank you. I will address any questions at the end of public comment, if, you know, or we'll get back with them.
Next is Mr. Newton Cook, followed by Nyla Pipes.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, even after 20 years, I'm always impressed by the staff and by the science. It's just incredible. And no doubt there's no place in the world you can get better science on this particular topic. But I want to step back. Why are we even discussing this issue? And why 10 years from now will we probably, not us, but someone else, be discussing this issue? Why does the lake have algae blooms? Toxic algae blooms. It's not complicated. 500 tons of pure phosphorus. That's not fertilizer. That's pure 100% phosphorus comes into the lake. The target's 140 tons, which is a lot. It's been coming into the lake since they ditched the Kissimmee River. It's still coming into the lake. And on top of that, the muck. And every time the wind blows, the lake gets to have colloidal suspension full of nutrients. It's not going to get better. Not going to get better until we address the health of the lake and the nutrients coming in from north of the lake. And I've sat through this loathsome process. I've sat through it today. And I hear very little ever being said about the source of the 500 tons of nutrients. And that's just phosphorus. That don't add up to nitrogen. Coming into this lake, destroying the heart of the Everglades. I don't hear it. And until we fix that, 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here, and not us, talking about why the lake has algae blooms. Thank you.
Next is Nyla Pipes, followed by Mike Elfenbein.
Good morning, Nyla Pipes, One Florida Foundation. Great presentations this morning. I am particularly glad that you guys have given an update on algal blooms and started from a place of explaining how blooms work, which I've been asking for quite some time, because in general, the public does not understand that algae is natural and that we have these problems when we feed it out of control with nutrients. So I think that this is a really powerful set of presentations you guys gave today. I also appreciate the effort to work on this in a way where we develop ways to respond via innovative technologies to address acute situations, such as when we have a bloom like we had at the Pokie Marina, or perhaps in the future we can even address these in the C-44 canal, which we get from time to time, as currently proven this last week and a half, 2 weeks here. We've been having problems in the C-44 canal without releases from Lake Okeechobee, which brings me to my next point. It'd be wonderful if we could just have a higher lake or a lower lake, or manage the lake differently in order to not have these algal blooms in our estuaries. But that's simply not the way it works. I think that there's room for improvement there, but I also think in the loathsome process, we've been focusing a lot on how to protect everything downstream from the algae in the lake. And as Mr. Newton Cook just pointed out, we're not doing enough within the lake itself and upstream of the lake to really get at these sources of nutrients. I'll finish up by saying that I appreciate the slide that points out that the sources of nutrients are urban, industrial, and agriculture. I know it's not popular to say, but a lot of people would really like ag to be the one and only source of these nutrients, and it's simply not true. We have to look at this holistically. That means addressing our septic systems, which every single one of that upper chain of lakes are lined with them. I know, that there's some work being done in the city of Okeechobee, around the rim ditch there. We've got to get at those septic systems. We also have to address any failing sewer systems upstream and within our own local basins as we get closer, to the coast as well, downstream. We've got to address the muck and the detritus from the organic material. That cycle that several people brought up, it's very important because it's not just one source. So let's just keep at it. Thank you very much for the hard work, and thank you for the science behind it.
Thank you. Mike Elfenbein?
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday Eve. great presentations, fantastic stuff. I really appreciated the detail and depth into which the algal bloom data was collected and presented. And I was looking for some clarity. There was a lot going on there, so I just wanted to be sure I understood it right. But in those slides where you showed the different species interacting with each other, I understood what you were saying to be that the one species is fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere, and in its life cycle, it's then feeding the other species. So where those two species are living together in harmony, are they not feeding off the nutrients that are already in the lake, the legacy nutrients? And, or if, either way, are they then just simply adding to the legacy nutrients in the lake? Is there any net gain to simply managing algal blooms? Or like Newton said, do we really need to kind of hyper-focus our efforts at getting those nutrients out of the lake that continue to come in seemingly unabated? I mean, they're 500 tons on average every year is a lot. Now we're proposing tools in the toolbox that, while they may benefit us in the short term as far as the blooms and the toxicity of those blooms, are we exacerbating the problem only to make it more costly and a greater problem to solve a decade or two down the road? Looking at the fact that 10 or 20 years ago, had we started, we probably would be in a better place today. So I recognize you can't respond to that or won't, but if you could address those questions when you do so, Drew, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, guys. This has been a great meeting so far.
Thank you. Mr. Richard Weiskopf?
There, hi. This is Rich Weiskopf at the University of Miami. It's been a while since I've talked to this group or other groups about the same thing. But in the second presentation, there were three elements that went around in a circle. One was repeated. It was prevention, monitoring, and treatment. And prevention, monitoring, treatment. So we heard a lot about monitoring and treatment. But again, the prevention, as a few of the other speakers have mentioned recently, that's the key to going at this. Instead of, well, not in addition to this close monitoring of what's going on the present time, if we go back in time, not only more than 20 years, as was suggested, but there's another set of data that's connected with this that I think we miss. And that's, of course, the economic part. Because the economic part is what generates the nutrients, whether they're from the urban, the industrial, or the agricultural. And so everybody has a part in it, and everybody has a part in denying it. So the recent changes in sewer systems is that we have developed a new system whereby the homes themselves can detoxify their own waste, so they don't have to connect either with a conventional sewer system that might not be working well, or with an expensive, a septic tank that's not working well, or a sewer system that's expensive to hook up as the suburban sprawl moves downward from Orange County. Also, there's a change in cropping patterns that's very dynamic and very, very telling. And it changes by different counties. So there are nurseries that come in very strong in some counties, and there's certain crops that disappear. There's also the presence of fecal matter in the water. And that could come from humans or it could come from animals. So both need to be studied. Now, I know that whenever we talk about agriculture or the cities, we say, oh, that's the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, and we don't have to do with that. Or it's the DEP that does that. We don't do that. But let's face it, the Water Management District is the real brains of the entire system. It has the thinking and the flexibility capacity to come up with new items and new approaches. And it's not connecting the other three. Now, we're always talking about three sides of the triangle. So it's time that the Water Management District itself took the initiative in force connecting the three sides and get all the responsible parties working on this so that we don't continue to repeat the same kind of scenario, that we're missing the causes of the nutrient runoffs. So let's get down to study it. We have the data from agricultural censuses and from industrial censuses, from other kinds of surveys of all the parts that need to be measured and connected. Thank you.
Mrs. Thurlipich? Please unmute.
Yeah. Mr. Lilipich, are you aware you're muted? Okay. I think she put her hand down.
That's it for public participants.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for making your comments. I did get some answers to the questions. So the first thing I want to reiterate, like I said at the beginning, is that 99.9% of our focus, DEP's focus, is on reducing nutrients and inputs that fuel algal blooms. Like I said, we invest over the last 3 years. We personally, as a district, have received $1.2 billion of appropriations to try to get at those nutrients coming into the watershed from all sources. Job number one, all hands on deck, is trying to get at the source to reduce these nutrients. The challenge we have at this point in time in our lives and our experience is these harmful nuisance algal blooms occur, and they occur in places where people are, and they are extremely noxious, and it is very hard for people to tolerate being proximal to those harmful algal blooms. And so I think it is in everyone's best interest to try to mitigate those algal blooms when they occur in those types of locations, using a minimal effort. We still need to remain 99.9% focused on reducing the sources of nutrients so that they do not fuel these harmful algal blooms in the future. So I want to reiterate that is our main focus. Getting at more of the specifics on the transducers, the manufacturer of those transducers had to go through lots of tests and field studies and so forth in order to produce them for this type of purpose. So they did get those approvals before they approached us for the use in these environments. That does not mean we are not monitoring for those effects. We are absolutely monitoring for those effects as we use them ourselves, because we would hate to have some ill effects on wildlife. The question about other beneficial species of phytoplankton, that is absolutely something we need to keep an eye on and maintain in our environment. It is the base of the food chain. When we get it, we are only looking at those conditions where we have essentially a monoculture of harmful Microcystis aeruginosus. Did I get that right? In that water column, really on the surface of the water, causing that sort of monoculture condition, which is not a balanced ecosystem, which is not good for the food chain. So we're really trying to address that specific nutrient, that specific algae when we see it, because it is the harmful algal bloom we are concerned with, and trying to protect the other beneficial phytoplankton. There was a question about the different species of slides. Dr. Wachnicka, I'll let you talk about their interaction that Mr. Elfenbein asked about. Do you recall that question? Whether there's an interaction between the... Yeah, yep.
Okay, so I can address this question. Yes, so it's a combination of different species. So how it works, this kind of qualitative analysis, we quickly scan the the water sample under microscope. Actually, we meaning actually Florida Department of Environmental Protection staff, scans the samples and identifies dominant taxon. So during the wet season, that is usually, well, it's actually 99.9% of the time cyanobacteria species. And we do have two types of cyanobacteria, those that can fix and those that cannot fix nitrogen. So when the nitrogen in the water becomes depleted, because usually the blooms are formed by Microcystis aeruginosa, which cannot fix atmospheric nitrogen. So when the nitrogen is available in a system, they feed on that nitrogen in the water. But when the nitrogen, as you remember on my last slide, I showed you that towards the end of the wet season, the dissolved inorganic nitrogen becomes depleted in the water. So that's when Microcystis aeruginosa is kind of outcompeted by other species present in the water. And those are usually the species that can fix atmospheric nitrogen. So when they convert the nitrogen from the atmosphere into ammonia, that basically can sustain the blooms of Microcystis aeruginosa, which basically that wouldn't be possible without the presence of the diazotrophs in the water. So yes, so the diazotrophs help to sustain blooms of the species that cannot fix nitrogen from atmosphere.
Thank you, Dr. Wachnicka. Mike Elfenbein, I'm going to quiz you on that when I see you next. All right, thank you everyone for participating. This has been a great forum. It has been a couple of years since we formed this participant list, and when we formed it, we said we would revisit those who are interested in participating as a member of the WRAC forum every so often, and it was about the 2-year mark. And we have had some turnover of people that are WRAC participants, members of the WRAC. So in the near future, we will resolicit membership. If you're still interested, please apply. We are not turning over. There is not a term limit here. So we'd be happy to have you reapply and try to make sure we get a good WRAC forum participation for the next 2 years. Also, we have, just through evolution, we have sort of used WRAC in different ways over the last 2 years, this WRAC public forum. And so if there's anyone that has any ideas on the use, the structure, the makeup of the WRAC forum, please let us know as we're doing this solicitation of membership, because I'd like to understand, going forward, how to best use a forum of this nature. So that will happen in the near future. Again, I want to reiterate, and I encourage this, I am open to public engagement at any time. Any member of our staff are open to public engagement at any time. You do not have to wait for WRAC public forums or anything like that. We are open for business and ready to engage whenever anybody has questions or interest in our business. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this meeting to an end, and I really appreciate everyone's participation, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.